It was never just about hair, which is why so many people got it wrong in actually saying, why does somebody like ZULAIKHA get to talk about hair? Why does ZULAIKHA with her softly coiled afro get to talk about
I won't
hair?
lie.
Right?
Your afro is not passing a pencil test. Now that I'm sitting in front of you, yeah.
Because you were somebody that actually was very overtly open by, I don't think this is your struggle, and you always came for me, you know, without actually taking the time to understand me.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's true. Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying we've come far to sit across each other and be having a conversation.
Yeah, no.
I mean, you come from being somebody that was restricted on my page from commenting, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I so wish you actually gave young me a chance to actually listen to some of the things that I would say.
Oh yeah, when I became your biggest hater, I was like, this young girl,
okay.
How dare she?
Kitchen food and the menu. If you love the menu, spread word. Let everybody know out there. Yeah, we appreciate it. How was the Mzeg's Kitchen lunch? You're buying a scale at me plate.
I am not. Tell you the truth.
Oh, you enjoyed it for real?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and thank you very much for enjoying our food.
Thank you.
ZULAIKHA, wow, we've come a long way, as you were telling me before we went on camera. I'm officially like a fan now. You know what I mean? I started off as a hater. It's like this 13-year-old girl with, nice hair, nice big curly afro. What does she know about activism and, standing on business? She's probably being used. She's probably a psyop. She's probably been sent by her rich parents that got her into that private school that she's at.
Never even gone to a private school. Yeah. Never have I ever had rich parents.
So, now that I've got you here, thank you for proving yourself, not to me, but I think to yourself. If ever you had any doubts about, the potential that you've got to shape the world, I think now you're beyond that. You're onto your second book, right? As an author.
No, I've launched my second book. I'm onto my third. Yeah.
You understand? As someone who's never completed a book, never even started one, I can only imagine what it takes to be brave enough to put your words to paper and then think that people should pay for that, and then to do it again and to be successful, to maintain a publishing deal, coming straight out of high school, right? Your first book, you hadn't even started varsity when you...
No, I did start varsity when I launched my first book. So thank you for having me on this conversation.
Thank you.
My first book was published in 2021. That's the best-selling children's title, My Coily Crowny Hair.
Wow.
I was 19 at the time. And now, this year, as of 2025, my second best-selling children's title, Brave Like Me, was published this year. But I started writing Brave Like Me in late 2023.
And then when did you start your first book?
My first book, I started writing it when I was actually in grade 11. Yeah, I was 17. Okay. And then I published it 2 years later.
Did you ever read 17? Like the magazine?
No.
You never... People?
No.
Cosmopolitan?
No.
So you were not feminized by mass media. Did you watch fashion TV?
No.
Okay. Okay, yes, you're 23 now. Do you ever watch like Sex in the City or any of those shows? So you don't know Carrie?
I do know of them, but I did not consume that.
Will and Grace?
I didn't consume that, and I didn't consume that for two reasons. The first, most candid one that I must be candidly honest about.
Yeah.
you're not gonna consume certain things in a household where you have a Muslim father. You're going to be told that's haram.
It is
Turn
haram.
it off.
It is haram. It is.
It's subjective.
It's not like your dad decided it's haram. It's haram.
So, I mean, the shows you're asking me about now, which were a
haram.
big thing then,
My sister's favorite
I
shows.
was not allowed to watch them, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure people at home watched them secretly when my dad was not home, but in my dad's presence, you were not going to watch that. He's going to tell you it's haram, turn it off. So that's the first candid reason why I
And
didn't
the
consume that.
Cosmopolitans, People's USA Today.
That's the first candid reason why I didn't consume that. And then the second reason why I didn't consume material like that was generally also because I found no interest in it. So I
Really?
learned how to read at the age of 4, nearly 5. So I got to primary school and I could read fluently already.
Nice.
And I consumed material that was already beyond my years. So I was reading newspapers. I started getting an interest in current affairs. I started getting an interest in what was going on in the world. I started getting an interest around the current affairs of the world from a very young age.
And
And
at this age, who did you live with?
both my parents.
No, but I'm just saying, like, kids. Do you have older sisters, cousins, or?
I do have older siblings. One I didn't grow up with, and then the one that I grew up with, I had an older sister where our interests were like very opposite interests. It was east and west.
But
right?
did you pick up the reading skills from older siblings?
No, I
or
picked
from
up
parents?
the reading from my dad. So my dad never had the opportunity to go to formal school and secondary school formally. He didn't go to university as well, but he was a very successful entrepreneur in my eyes, right? And given how his upbringing was, right, he wanted a very different experience for me. And he went out of his way to ensure that I could read. He provided the material. He wanted a very totally different experience for me than his own experience. So he taught me how to read from a very young age, like very, very young age. I mean, I had just turned 4 and I could write my name.
Nice.
Yeah.
But that's normal, right?
Yes, I think it's normal now.
Well, it
Kids
should
are
be
very
normal,
smart
yeah.
now. I was like 3, 4, I could write my name and, I could write other people's names. And then he started picking up on that, right? And one of the reasons why he started
Where
doing
did you write
this...
people's names? On the walls in the house?
No. I was
So you weren't naughty?
I was very, very, very well behaved as a child.
I wrote on the walls.
I was very well behaved as a child. So
But I spelled it right.
it was very odd that activism is an act of being a rebel. So it was very odd to people how this very poised, well-behaved child that's got this history of being so well-behaved became somebody that built a name over an act of rebellion, because that's what activism is, right? But even though I was well-behaved, I mean, I was not taught to comply with what was wrong. There's a difference between how I was raised to be well-behaved and well-mannered and all of that, and then there's a difference in being raised to comply. Comply with things that don't make sense, comply with injustices, comply with injustices, and comply with being treated in a manner that is not justice to yourself and your identity. So I wasn't taught that.
You weren't taught children are to be seen, not heard.
Yes, I wasn't taught that.
What were you taught?
My dad actually used to say to me, if you have something to say, can you please say it, right? He actually was someone, when I had an era of being very timid and quiet as a child, he would actually force me to speak. And he would say to me, you're going to say it's okay and it's not okay. And I want to know if something is not okay now, not months later. You're going to say it's okay now and it wasn't okay. I need to know if it's not okay. That's what he used to say to me. And he used to say to me, you need to have an opinion about things that affect you. You can't just go about life saying, it's okay and it's not okay, right? So
how are you?
what do you mean, how am I?
You're not okay, right? Sorry, I like catching people off.
I need to understand what you mean by how are
Because
you?
people are like, "How are you?" I'm okay. It's okay. Everything is okay. So when I tell you you're not okay, and not to say as in you're crazy or anything, but you're odd, you're different. You know what I mean?
Well, I suppose.
You stand out.
Yes. So, yeah, I was taught how to read by my dad from home. And then that's how I went to school and I already knew how to read. I was taught from home by my
Did
dad.
other kids know how to read as well as you?
When I got to primary school, I was sort of an outlier with some of my peers because I actually vividly remember the book that we were reading, Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill,
Yeah.
I remember that.
Jack and Jill, and this is very important because it's one of the reasons why I write children's books about the type of themes I cover in my
favorite was
children's
Paul and
books.
Pex.
So Jack and Jill was a story about a blonde and blue-eyed boy and a blonde and blue-eyed girl. And their reality was totally divorced from the reality of actually everybody in that class as South African children. Jack and Jill went to Big Ben in London to drink apple juice by Big Ben. And the weather was always cloudy every day. And everything about Jack and Jill did not represent the reality of a South African child. And I remember I was an outlier with my peers because as we were learning how to read Jack and Jill, I had already finished reading it and I started asking other questions. I started asking questions like, oh, why do the illustrations have to look like this? We don't look like these characters. Actually, nobody in this class
Who are you
looks
asking?
like Jack and Jill. I was asking the teacher. I was like, actually, nobody in this class looks like Jack or Jill.
Hold on.
So
You're asking the teacher, like, weren't you scared? Were the teachers black when you went to
no,
school?
yeah, I remember that one particular teacher, my grade 1 teacher, she was white. And I remember I'd already finished reading Jack and Jill. And now the biggest concern for me was why nobody in the class looked like Jack or Jill and why we are in South Africa. It's sunny and we are reading about two characters that are in cloudy London and their reality looks nothing like the lives that we live. And so I was already asking those questions. So I was quite the outlier. Growing up. And being the outlier also came with some form of bullying as well for a very long time.
So when you grow up, what is that like the environment like? Where are you? What neighborhood are you starting, your formative years in? Where are you taking your first steps? What's the street where you're taking the first steps?
Oh, the streets.
Well, don't tell us the exact, but like which area is this so that we can actually have a picture of what your world looked like since it wasn't like Jack and Jill's world.
Okay. So ZULAIKHA, basically to give you background on who is ZULAIKHA Patel. ZULAIKHA is a girl that was born into an interfaith and an interracial family. My dad is an
What is
Indian,
interfaith?
where the families are of different faiths, different religions, right? So,
Oh, yes, yes.
right. My father is an Indian man from India who is Muslim. He came to South Africa in the 70s. He met my mother in somewhat mid to late 90s. My mother is a Ndebele Christian woman, right? Who is also, who's got cultural traditional beliefs as well, right? And then I grew up with this complexity of my identity, navigating it where my parents' marriage on both sides of each family was the first time both families have encountered an interracial marriage. There was no exposure to it on each side. So I've got family in India. Over the years, some of them joined in South Africa, 2005, like early 2000s.
Which
some of
part,
them joined.
Like who? Like your dad?
My dad's side, yes, the Patels.
Yes, but they came in like your dad's siblings, your dad's nieces, nephews.
My dad's nephews, right? So older cousins. But I had like large age gaps with them. So even though you were like my older cousin, you could have been considered my uncle, right? And then my maternal family is from KwaMhlanga, KwaNdebele. So I grew up and I could speak my maternal home language, it's Ndebele. which my second book is available.
Skate.
Is available in Isindebele as well.
Lovely.
And then I spoke English with my dad. My dad is actually somebody that he spent more time in South Africa than he spent at home. And he ended up becoming more accustomed to South Africa's ways, right?
Okay.
So then my parents started a life together in Pretoria. I believe that's where they met. And then they both came from a background of...
In the old Kwandebele.
My mother came from a background
Right.
of extreme poverty, and my dad also came from a background of a not so good background. So they came together to build a life for their children that did not look like the childhoods that they had. So I grew up in Arcadia near the Loftus Stadium. I went to the first primary school I went to a creche in Waterkloof, and then I went to a primary school in Brooklyn Primary, and then I went to Arcadia Primary. So that's where my upbringing was happening, right? And then in the home, in the early years of my childhood, my parents were still together, and I grew up with both of them in the home. And I grew up with more of my maternal family members present than my paternal family members. So
And of those
in the
maternal
house,
ones,
then
were they more women or men?
more women.
Okay.
More women. So my mother has one brother only, a younger brother, and her dad was not someone that was actively in her life.
So a lot of your masculinity came from your
So-
father's side, because you got your male cousins that came in from India, your father obviously being the male figure.
Yes, so my father was the male figure, and then I had male cousins that came, and then here and there, one female cousin. So then in the home, the religion that was practiced was Islam. I was born a Muslim, and I practiced Islam throughout my childhood. But then
And your mother converted?
Yes, she
Okay.
did. In the early years of her relationship with my dad, she did revert. And then the home that I grew up in was different from my maternal family, because nobody in my maternal family was Muslim. And it was also the first time there was exposure into another religion outside of Christianity and exposure to Islam. So in the home, we were Muslim. And then I knew that my paternal family members were Muslim. But in the home, it was very different. My upbringing was very different from that of my paternal family members. My paternal family, my dad came from a family which also made him the outlier of his family. He came from a very conservative family as well. And they were very, very conservative, you know. And then on my mom's side, there was a lot of learning to do, because this was exposure into something that's totally new, that's also painted a certain way in the media. So you come with certain misconceptions of it.
So hold on, must have been in the 90s when they meet, right? Or 80s?
No, my parents met in somewhat the mid, definitely after 94.
Okay.
They met,
So but in the 90s.
yes, maybe 97 or 98, around
Yes.
there.
So, but that's pre-Islamophobia, 9/11 time in South Africa. I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
No, don't look at it in terms of the American context. Look at it as in they met just right after very early stages of South Africa's democracy, where coming out of a system that has separated people, not just on race, but has been so insidious to also separate people in terms of separating Black people on cultural group as well. And we coming out of a system where the manner of separation, you were taught a lot of different things than a lot of negative things about a person who doesn't look the same as you. So that's why I'm emphasizing that there was a lot of learning that was happening on both sides, because there was no exposure.
Well, this is specifically in the region where you grew up in Arcadia, and
Just to specifically talk about my family
Yeah.
dynamic growing up. My family dynamic growing up, there was not a lot of exposure around the type of life I was living, my identity. Everything was very new. And so there was a lot of learning that was happening on both sides.
at the same time.
Yes, and that's what I was navigating as well.
So now you're learning, obviously, as you're coming into being. You don't arrive first because obviously your parents need to come before you. And you did say you've got older siblings, right? Okay. So there are people that are seeing the world or being introduced to the world prior to you, who've got different lenses from you as well, and don't see how their, I guess, training
Yeah.
could harm other people who are trained differently or grew up differently. Tell us about those traumas. I'm fully 100% black, right? Black African ethnic. So I don't have the mixed race issue. And
Or experienced.
yeah. And also, growing up, although I never mind dating outside of my race, right? I always intrinsically knew that from experiencing other kids, how they grew up, especially a lot of the mixed kids that I grew up with, right? Because I grew up in a very mixed region. So even some of the things you're talking about, I didn't really experience them, as you're saying. I never wanted to have a mixed family because I've seen how it can hurt, you know what I mean, to be different. Just coming from a 100% black family and growing up in the suburbs, when I go to my rural family or even my family in the townships, already the way in which we grew up is different. Now, if you add religion to that, or faith, if you add race to that mix, how did you emerge from that with a very, I guess, an empathetic worldview? Because someone who grew up in the environment that you grew up in, I'd expect to be more, I don't know, adversarial, but you seem to be very understanding of people's ignorance.
Well, actually, no one's ever asked me that. Nobody's ever asked me that. I mean, I talk extensively about my upbringing and why my upbringing makes the work that I do so personal, why I speak so personally about anti-racism, why I've been able to sustain activism for this long and actually live now a life of activism. Nobody asked me actually how, because you need to have a certain level of empathy as well, because now in the work that I do, sometimes I've had to separate myself from it in terms of separating my personal feelings from it, because the work of race in South Africa has got a lot of learning, unlearning, decoloniality. And in that, one thing you must understand, when you are thrusted into this type of work, you're no longer just somebody that defends a cause as well. You somewhat fall into the role of an educator to a certain degree. And being a person that is an educator, you then need to take out the personal feeling, because at the end of the day, you need to teach for the betterment of society, right? So one of the first things I think I have to be grateful for is an upbringing with faith, right? An upbringing with faith is one that has maybe given me this deepened sense of empathy. I've always been an empath. I've always been an empath, somebody who feels deeply, somebody who...
Yeah, please do explain, because some of us are not...
Somebody who feels
They haven't been to therapy, we don't know the...
delves very deeply into feelings, and somebody that's able to delve deeply into the feelings of another person beyond surface level emotions, right? I've always been an empath, but the reason why I also drive empathy through my work, I'm quite grateful to having had an upbringing of faith as well, where growing up Muslim and being taught about certain principles around forgiveness definitely did contribute to this level of empathy that I have as I unpack certain traumas, certain pains, and I'm able to also be empathetic maybe to the party that gave me that trauma as well, right? I have to give it to having a religion, growing up and being brought up in a home where you are taught that at the end of the day, God teaches us forgiveness. Allah teaches us forgiveness. We turn to Allah to seek repentance and seek forgiveness. And because Allah, I remember being taught that because Allah is the ever forgiving and somebody where if you turn, not somebody, but you know what I mean, a higher power where when you turn to Him in repentance to seek forgiveness, Allah will forgive. So who are we to not forgive other people if we are consistently in a cycle of turning to Allah, God? We're turning to God to seek repentance and forgiveness from God, and we want to be forgiven. Who are we to not forgive
Others.
the next person, right? And that upbringing with that level of faith then allows you to carry a certain level of empathy. And having an understanding
What?
of...
A doormat empathy? Everyone must step on you and... you know,
No, I'm
must
getting
turn the
to
other
it.
cheek and-
No.
I'm just...
No.
I'm trying to
You know,
understand what you mean.
If this was a conversation about religion, we could go into the depth of it, because at the end of the
Okay.
day, as much as you are also taught to forgive and not hold grudges, you're equally also taught to not place yourself in a situation that is toxic for you or an environment that is toxic for you, and so on and so forth, right? But to come back to that question, right? Having been able to have that level of empathy is because I've come to a deepened understanding that the work that I'm doing may not be work for me solely, may not be work for just this generation. It's work for the future, actually. And in educating people, you also have to understand, how did people actually get to that point of ignorance? Who did that to them? We come from not a very long time ago. I mean, it's only been 31 years of democracy. But as a country, we come out of a very insidious colonial establishment that has taken so much from people's minds, indoctrinated people as well. And so when you do the work that I'm doing, you come to a certain point of understanding that in the work that you're doing, you're educating. And when you are educating, for example, people that have brought about a certain level of trauma, you also come to understand who did that to them to be that ignorant, right? You are not fighting against that person. You are trying to educate them as well to speak up against the system that indoctrinated them that way and still continues to have remnants in present day society. So it's that understanding that's given me a sense of empathy and patience, especially in the work that I do, and being able to navigate my experience the way I've navigated it. Because I mean, I grew up not really even being understood by both sides of my family, right? And beyond just seeing it through the lens of my family, it gave me a point of also seeing it in terms of South African society, right?
So
for example,
who was affectionate and who was fascinated by you?
I can't say there was this party that was affectionate, this party was fascinated, because I experienced everyone very differently, right? So on my paternal side, that actually, there were traumas that happened there where I was primarily not accepted, rejected on one basis only, because I'm not Indian enough, because of
your mother's black.
the blackness that exists in me, right? And how I look different from everybody else and what my identity represents.
This is
that
in
there
India.
is a certain representation of blackness through me. And because we come from a system that has also indoctrinated Indian people with a certain level of anti-blackness, which is why to date we still have problems where if we need to have intervention, if we talk about anti-racism, to talk about anti-blackness that exists in predominantly Indian communities.
I mean, they invented
right?
skin bleaching.
So then on my maternal side, you would expect to be completely accepted because of your because of your positioning in terms of your identity, you would
Or as
think
in the black is at the
you would
bottom.
think
So
that
therefore,
no, you would think where your identity has a certain level of closeness and similarity, and you would think that you're fully accepted there, but then you also have challenges because you're not fully black, or you're not black enough, or there's a certain level of privilege, or
Yeah,
you
you
still
do.
look different at the end of the day, right? You still look different. So I had to navigate that as a child, and then navigate my experience of then coming into outside of my family, then experiencing South Africa for what it is, like going into schools where those were predominantly white. In the eyes of a white person, I was just black. And then in schools, I had the black experience, and I had to take on everything that came with the black experience in those former Model C schools, those former whites only schools, taking on everything that comes with the black experience in those institutions. So it was a lot to navigate. But the level of empathy came from the fact that I knew that a huge part of my work is around being an educator, and a lot of that educating I would do would be for the betterment of society, and the breaking down of this insidious system that still has remnants in our country.
So after you lay yourself on the floor as a sacrificial lamb, like what?
I didn't call myself a sacrificial lamb.
Well,
but,
I mean,
go on.
I mean,
Subjective, yeah.
no, see, honestly, I don't know if you're more light skinned than me, but like I'm pretty light skinned, and you're not. Like I wouldn't say you're light skinned, like to the point where if I was a black child, I wouldn't think that you were black, right? You're not that much light skinned. You're not yellow, 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 yellow. You know what I mean? I've got freckles, which make me similar to a lot of white kids who are redhead. So I get the Proximus, treatment whenever I'm with white people. So I understand that advantage. But with you in particular, you don't have, I guess, the social safety net, right? That one would expect of someone who comes out advocating for a community. You know what I mean? As in, the community you're advocating for has no means to support you.
I wouldn't say I advocate for a community, but you can.
Well, I'm just saying, if black people, especially young black women, they don't have the means to elevate you to a position where, your advocacy could be rewarded with something material. You know what I mean? So it's more of an internal thing. You need to feel that you've done good. What motivates you? I mean, you've been in this activism for 10 years, you know what I mean, already, since we first saw you.
So what motivates me to keep going, essentially? Well, look.
Not to keep going, to throw yourself in the firing line. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a very different motivation.
Yes. So the work that I do is so closely tied to my own upbringing when it comes to race, and especially how my upbringing was affected by the insidious system of apartheid, which still has its remnants in the country, right? And one of the reasons why I took this decision to throw myself in what you want to call the firing line. Activism is also throwing yourself in the firing line because you are sacrificing a lot of things to stand up for a cause, especially a cause around race, and a cause where so many people benefit from the thing you are advocating against, right?
And also when you don't have rich parents.
So many people benefit from it. You stand to lose a lot when you're talking so openly and radically about race, right? So the one thing that really motivated me is I have to go back to my 13-year-old self. I know what it feels like to not fit in. I know what it feels like to be rejected because of the blackness that exists in you and the blackness in your identity. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to also not be entirely accepted. I also know what it feels like to have your identity tossed around and insulted because of how you look and the blackness that exists in you, and because of what the legacy of colonialism and apartheid has indoctrinated people with around what is beauty, what is acceptable. I know what it feels like to walk into an institution and be told the very things that make up your identity, such as your hair, your home language, are not permitted, right? I know what that all feels like. And because I know the pain that comes with those feelings, I wouldn't want that for somebody else that would walk after me. I wouldn't want that for them. Neither do I think that there's any sense of normalcy in that, right? And equally, the one thing that has motivated me has been the work that we are doing around racism. Is work that's probably not even for ourselves, actually. Because you may not live to actually see the day when South Africa is a truly anti-racist country, and South Africa South Africa is a country where
I'm gonna live long. If I have to live until 200 to see it,
okay, but the points I'm making, for instance, we might not live to see the day where we see a truly decolonized South Africa, or maybe even a South Africa where the land has come back, right? Maybe, right? So that understanding of the work that you do actually might not even be for you. It might be for future generations of your bloodline, right? Future generations of your bloodline, and is actually for a greater betterment of society. Motivates you to keep doing that work.
I want to be in that society, though.
For example, when I was 13, the reason why I chose to do what I did, right? Knowing very well that I would be an outcast after that. Knowing that after that, the rest of my high school years would make me some form of a person that was targeted because you are the outspoken one. You are the one that's deemed as some form of a danger. You know, it's crazy. At some point, I was called a danger.
You're the tall puppy.
Yes, and the reason why I chose to do what I did at that point was because I knew what that would mean, not just for myself, but every other person that has an experience like mine. And I always say to people, that specific moment in my life is personal to everybody else, because that's a story that we all share commonly, having gone to these schools and not being accepted because of our blackness and being expected to assimilate to whiteness. That I knew I had to do that because that would spark a very necessary change, not just in South Africa, but it would spark a very necessary change and very necessary discourse in the country. I knew from that point on, things wouldn't be the same as what they were before that. It would have sparked something, and it would have sparked a certain level of consciousness in us as well, you know, who relate to that movement on a personal level. You know, people with hair like mine, people with dreadlocks. I knew what that would spark in us all. And I knew what that meant for everyone else beyond me, which is why I chose to do that. I knew it was not just about me. And maybe that's perhaps the reason why I continue to do work to contribute to that mission, because it's actually not just about me, you know? And there were people that came before me that started to fight against the system that was previously legislated. And then now we are a generation that continues to now do the second part of the work and the foundation they laid. It's not just about me. It's actually about us creating a world that is better for humanity in general.
Now, I'd like to thank you for your success in inspiring a generation of young activists. I think we focus too much on the actual cause and the progress towards reaching its ultimate goal. And sometimes we forget that in the nature of struggle, the mere fact that there are people willing or brave enough to exist is enough sometimes. You know what I mean? It's enough to inspire change. It's enough to unsettle those who have accepted the status quo. And it's enough to also remind people that we do have a conscience. I want to speak about your history, especially on your maternal side. You told me your mother is from Gwandebele, right? And earlier you were talking on the phone, and I heard you speaking Zulu. So I was like, you've lived in Pretoria, which is right. Well, it's actually in the Gwandebele, royal kingdom
Yeah.
of old. You know what I mean? It actually does belong to the Ndebele kings. And you grew up right on the footsteps of Gwandebele, yet you speak Zulu. Why don't Ndebeles speak their language?
I was
Like,
speaking to a Zulu person on that phone call you
yeah,
heard
but
me on.
I've
That's
never
why I
heard a
was
Ndebele
booked.
person speaking Ndebele nje, just in general.
Really?
Like, unless they're speaking to like their grandmother or something. And I've worked with a lot of Ndebele people. You know what I mean? Like I produced the Ndebele hip hop album. As well, I did some work with Gok Esther Mahlangu as well as part of that. I've traveled to Zimbabwe, Bulawayo, where none of the waiters or people working at the hotel staff, right, were Shona, but they all spoke Shona and did not speak Ndebele, like naturally. So I don't understand the context of how it happened over there because they've got a different history, right, and a genocide as well involved in that. But I do want to understand how that happened in South Africa because I relate to it personally as someone of, I guess, Xhosa in somewhat from my maternal side, right? And because my grandmother is from Soweto, my mother is from Soweto, our Xhosa family speaks Zulu as well because Joburg was a place where you need to speak Zulu. And if you spoke our mother tongue, it would be rural. It's like, yeah, you're rural, you're backward. You know what I mean? So that's how I experienced that. But I never understood that same sort of thing from the Ndebele people who like have a kingdom in Gauteng. You know what I mean? Like this is like their home, so they didn't have to travel from somewhere else and speak whatever's being spoken in the business district, so to speak. So how does that come about?
Yeah. So, firstly, the phone call you heard me speak Zulu on, I was speaking Zulu because I was speaking to somebody that is Zulu.
You
So,
speak good Zulu. That's why I was like, that's a good Zulu.
no, I was just speaking to somebody that's Zulu, right?
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with the fact that I don't speak my home language, but I was speaking to somebody that was Zulu. And, what you're touching on, why do Ndebele people not speak their own home language in certain spaces? Why, when you have an entire kingdom in Gauteng,
Yeah.
why you don't speak your home language in Gauteng? That, in the nature of that question, is going to take us back to the loss of land through colonialism, right? Yes, we talk about how Ndebele people have a kingdom in Gauteng, right? But the loss of land has made us not know that, right? The loss of land and the theft of land has actually erased that type of history. Not a lot of people know that actually, a certain portion of Gauteng is actually meant to be part of KwaNdebele as well, right? And it's in such close proximity to the other portion of KwaNdebele that's in Mpumalanga. And so not a lot of people know that there's been a lot of erasure around that. And same as with other groups of people, the theft of land and the erasure of that history of theft has brought us to not knowing the fact that, for example, Pretoria is historically actually land that's meant to be part of KwaNdebele, right? Because we don't know that
They're
Pretoria
doing buildings.
Pretoria is occupied currently, right? And through that,
Your native land is occupied by a foreign occupation power.
through that, you lose a lot of history. A lot of it gets erased. And one thing I can say personally from what I've witnessed, why I've witnessed this this issue of not necessarily speaking your home language. For me, if I were to speak my home language, isiNdebele, fluently so, in my personal settings, everybody is going to look at me confused. And I've actually heard people actually say, what are you saying? Are you speaking a form of broken Zulu or what are you saying? And I'm like, no,
I love
this
it.
is an entire language. I'm not messing up Zulu. I'm speaking isiNdebele, right? I'm not messing up Zulu. So there has been a lot of erasure and a lot of, I think there's also a sense of erasure of the language as well. For example, when I released my second book, it was very deliberate between my publishers and I to actually have it also published in my home language outside of it being published in Afrikaans, Zulu, and Xhosa in English. It was a very
And Tsonga?
deliberate decision.
You didn't have it in Tsonga?
No, not yet.
Okay, cool.
It was a very deliberate decision for us to also have it available in my home language. Because one thing I said to my publisher is that when I've seen primary schools in KwaNdebele and I don't see children in those primary schools reading books in their home language, they're reading books in Zulu. You go to a school in the regions, they're not learning isiNdebele as a subject. You know how you'll have generally sometimes in schools outside of Gauteng, you'll have English as a first additional subject, and then maybe for KZN, for example, you'll have isiZulu home language, but isiZulu will always be a subject. You go to Limpopo,
In Pretoria, I know a
Sepedi
lot of the schools
will
as
be
well. They
a
had
subject,
Sepedi
right?
and Tswana.
You go to
Like in Littleton. I know Littleton Manor has got Pedi and Tswana.
also the high school I went to had Sepedi. You go to KwaNdebele, you don't have isiNdebele as a subject, right?
Your school didn't have Ndebele.
No, the high school I went to had
No,
Sepedi.
like any of the schools. None of them had Ndebele in Pretoria.
I don't know if there are schools that have isiNdebele.
But your school
But the
didn't.
one I went to had Sepedi as a subject.
And no Zulu,
Right.
nothing else. Just
No,
Sepedi.
just Sepedi and
Okay.
Afrikaans.
Okay.
You had an option to pick between Afrikaans or Sepedi. So now that in me made me realize that there's a certain erasure that's taking place, right? Of a language, and also perhaps people are afraid to also speak it because of the judgment that comes. Like, what kind of language is that? It sounds like Zulu, but it sounds different from Zulu. Or in my case, where some people have said to me, no, but you sound like you're speaking broken Zulu. And I'm like, no, it's not broken Zulu.
Or baby Swati or something.
Yes, or baby Swati, or sometimes people will say, but like, you sound like you're speaking Zulu and mixing Pedi words in it.
Oh yes, because
right?
is Stebele Samulichane, where the Pedis and Hamulichane is where the Ndebeles and the Pedis came together back in the day, yeah. So
Yes.
there is some...
And then
yeah.
you'll have somebody say, no, but you sound like you're speaking Zulu, and then you're mixing it with Pedi words. So there's not a lot
And
that
there's
exists
like
around
three
the...
Ndebeles, right?
There's not a lot that exists around the language and a lot of representation, which is why I think there's a loss of people speaking their home language in personal settings. But I think there's a lot of work that's being done. I mean, Gok Esther Mahlangu is doing phenomenal work in preserving the arts, preserving the heritage through arts. Kwekwezi FM as well is doing significantly well as a media platform that converses in isiNdebele. Now there's my children's book that's also available in isiNdebele. So I think there's work being done to preserve the heritage. But I think really some of that loss has come from a certain erasure and also perhaps the history of tribalism that came from the history of divide and conquer under the apartheid regime.
Yeah, so I want to delve into that because I wanted to ask about your maternal grandmother on that side. Like that side of the family, they would have
She's
been...
not Ndebele by birth, my maternal grandmother.
Your mother. So she's...
She's Swati, but she married a Ndebele person.
So she's Ngoni, though.
Yes.
So that's the same group, but now she married your Ndebele grandfather.
Yes,
right?
and then she lived amongst Ndebele people. So by virtue of that, she always used to say she was diluted by Ndebeles. But
Well, yeah.
actually, ancestrally, she's Swati, but she married a Ndebele man and she lived amongst Ndebele people. So she always used to say she's been diluted by Ndebele people. Yeah.
No, how did you number one come to know her, and what role did she play in your life?
How did I come to know my maternal grandmother?
Yeah, like how did you come to oh, this is who my grandmother is?
Well, I mean, my mother grew up very close to her mother, so naturally, so she was a part of my life, right? Through her having a close relationship with my mother. I mean, it's nothing like mind blowing. It's just naturally a child having a relationship with the grandmother by virtue of the relationship that exists between your grandparent and their child, who is your parent. So, yeah, and then growing up, it was normally just the normal grandchild-grandparent relationship. I visit you during school holidays, here and there if my parents...
Oh, you visit her?
Yes.
Okay.
Here and there if my parents were busy with work, she would come to Pretoria to come babysit my sister and I.
Oh, nice, lovely. Your mom had help. So it wasn't of your mother was like this. I mean, my mother was like this with me. That's why I'm like this with you, with your mother. She didn't like impart wisdom, that she got from her own mother through telling you about their relationship interpersonally.
Who exactly?
Your mother.
My mother
She didn't mediate your understanding of your grandmother.
No,
by
because
telling you how
she was actually there for me to actually have a relationship with her and learn about her. She was actually there for me to just have those conversations with her directly.
And how important is that for kids to actually get, like, what can you say is the most, something not material, but your most cherished inheritance from your grandmother?
My most cherished inheritance?
Nothing material, though.
Well, I think generally the most important thing for children to have, generally outside of everything, the most important thing for children to have is actually having both their parents in their lives and having their father present as well. Your father plays a very different role in comparison to the role that your mother plays. And parenting styles very different between what you will get from your father and what you get from your mother. Your mother is your nurturer. Your father is your disciplinarian, right? Your father teaches you the world. Your father teaches you how to be for the world, right? Your mother nurtures you away from the world in a way. Right? Your mother is your nurturer, your father is your disciplinarian.
When I want to run from the world, I run to my mother. When I want to face the world, I run to my dad. Yeah. I get you.
When you want the truth, you go to your father. When you want a solution that doesn't coddle you, you go to your father, right?
Yeah.
And when you want coddling and be told, no, Tay, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine. You want hugs, you want softness, you want you want nurturing, you want emotional
That's why my
nurturing.
mom is boy. Yes, I love that.
You go to your mother, right? So the most important thing for me, for children to have, right, especially when it comes to us creating a society of adults that regulate emotions well, adults that have healed inner childs as well, is for a child to have both their parents in their life, have their father and have their mother in their life as well, and be able to have that balance, whether or not the parents have a romantic relationship or not. But it's very important for a child to have both those roles present in their lives.
So you think like your grandmother...
So that's the first thing what I think is the most important thing generally for a child.
Okay.
Right, just generally. Then the most valuable inheritance that I've gotten from my grandmother, I would actually say, from time to time, I was the very odd, occasionally misunderstood grandchild, and maybe from time to time we butted heads a lot because I was very different from everybody, and I was very firm.
You're one of how many? Sorry.
One of how many? No, so
like siblings, yeah.
One of in the house I was one of two because we were only two in the house. And then growing up, before I had younger cousins that came into the picture, I was one of three. I had my older sister and then an older cousin as well.
And then in terms of your
And then
grandchild order to your grandmother,
my grandchild order is there's a cousin, that's the first grandchild. Then there's my sister, who's the second grandchild. And then I'm the third grandchild. And then much later into life, when I was growing up, I was like the last born grandchild. Then much later into life, I had younger cousins that just after that came into the picture. So I'm the third, right?
Yeah.
So I had here and there some rockiness because I was very different and very firm on defending my difference and my difference in views and my difference in my perception of the world and things like that. But I would say the one thing that I got from her is actually inkani. Inkani to believe in yourself, inkani to continue to stand up for yourself, inkani to actually continue to pursue success and independence in your life, and just inkani to be able to live essentially and go about life, right? I think that's the most important, most valuable thing I got was inkani. And I think inkani has served me well in life.
Is she still around?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's Inkani. And Inkani has served me well in life because it's because of Inkani I decided to do the thing that everybody knows me for now. With whether or not
Hold on,
people
which is
understood
that?
me.
Now I know you as an author. I've sort of
Yeah,
forgotten where I first met you.
The activism, the one moment that introduced me to the world.
Oh yeah, when I
right?
became your biggest hater. I was like, this young girl.
Okay.
How dare she? Wow.
Yeah, okay. Well, because of Inkani, I still continue to do what I've been doing and what I believe in and stood by what I believe in, regardless of how many noters they were. I mean, there were people that were even worse than you.
Noted and hater don't go together, but yeah, I get what
there
you
were
mean.
people that were even worse than you, So it's because of Inkani that I've stood by what I do and defend the cause I stand for. So I would say the most valuable thing I got was Inkani. And Inkani has served me well in life.
Can she read?
Can't you read? No.
Oh, your grandmother can't read. Yeah, my grandmother couldn't read either. But I think the greatest thing that she taught me is a shame for not knowing my mother tongue. My grandmother could not speak any English. And when I realized that I could not communicate with her, I became very ashamed. Very, very ashamed. So ashamed, in fact, that I learned my mother tongue. I learned how to speak Shutsong, much better than my siblings, older and younger. And that gave me a sense of identity that I could, rock with. I asked you about your maternal side of your family, right? Because I wanted you to get out of the way. And also because, the real reason I wanted to actually even have a conversation with you is because I watched your interview on SMWX. And on that, you said my dad, I think on my
you were
first count.
counting.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But you said my dad, my dad, my dad, my dad,
So
my dad,
glad
my
you
dad.
watched so
So much.
attentively.
I had to tweet about it. I'd be like, yeah. Someone else says my dad, my dad, my dad,
because
my
it's
dad.
my dad. And my dad is like, oh my gosh. I think I still love my dad so much, even though he's not here. And yeah, I'm never going to stop talking about that man.
So, okay, your dad, the enigmatic dad of yours. My dad hasn't called me today. Oh yeah, he actually did. He called me at 10:21.
Are you going to call him back after this?
No. He must call me. My dad calls me.
No, you must also call him.
No, he brought me into this world.
No, but you must also call him.
Yeah,
Because one day you won't be able to call him and you'll yearn to want to call him. The day you can't call him.
No, I'm waiting for him to send me some airtime. I'll call him. He has to still be a dad. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, your dad has played a wonderful role in shaping and molding you in the furnace. You know what I mean? Because the world is hard. And I think that when you first came about as a 13-year-old, when was this? It must have been, what, 2015?
2016, yeah.
2016. So what was I doing in 2016? 2016, yes, 2016, I was doing amazing things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw you and what you were standing for, I felt like, but it's not her struggle. It's, she's light skinned. She doesn't need to defend. She doesn't have kinky, what we call it, kaferar. When you can't
Don't
even
use that term.
Yeah, but that's what we call it. It's like, that's the colloquial term. So already, just even in that term.
Yeah, you felt like that's why you have the history of actually, we've come far for you and I to actually be sitting.
I've combed my hair with that
No,
cane.
I'm saying we've come far for you and I to be sitting across each other and having a conversation because you were somebody that actually was very overtly open by, I don't think this is your struggle, and you always came for me, without actually taking the time to understand me.
Yeah,
right?
no, that's true. Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying we've come far to sit across each other and be having a conversation.
Yeah, no.
Meaning you come from being somebody that was restricted on my page from commenting, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't stop you because you still sent the DMs. And now here you are having a conversation with me and unrestricted from my page.
Oh, thank you.
So
thank you.
Yes,
I feel like
you felt like it wasn't my struggle. You've never walked a mile in my shoes, right?
Yeah.
You didn't understand the depth of why speaking about race was so important to me because, yes, the media framed it around hair. Hair is a symptom of a greater diagnosis. It's not just about hair. And I don't know how many times I've said it was never just about hair. It was never, ever just about hair. You see, hair is one of your tangible things in your identity that oppressors can use to enforce oppression. It's a tangible thing, right? My understanding of why hair became such a pivotal thing in South Africa's history of racism. You had the pencil test in apartheid, a pencil test, something like a pencil being shoved into your hair, and whether that pencil moved or not did not just determine what racial group you were classified in, it determined what you would be subjected to in terms of your standard of living, the conditions of life you got. It determined where you were going to live, and based on where you were going to live under the apartheid regime, that determined your access as well, that determined what type of cycle you will be stuck in. Will you find yourself in a perpetual cycle of poverty as well and fight to get out of it? What type of access to healthcare, what type of education will you be afforded? It determines so much with your entire livelihood. And it was just hair, right? And then you come into a democratic South Africa. Hair becomes the thing that makes children that stands in the way of children's right to accessing education. You go to schools that say, in order for you to be here, you have to relax your hair. And for as long as your hair represents blackness, you're not accepted, right? It's not just about hair. Hair is the thing that was used to enforce deepened institutionalized racism. It was never just about hair, which is why so many people got it wrong in actually saying, why does somebody like ZULAIKHA get to talk about hair? Why does ZULAIKHA with her softly coiled afro get to talk about hair?
Right? Your afro is not passing a pencil test now that I'm sitting in front of you. Yeah.
It was never just about hair, right? And that's why you got my stance wrong. Right? And I so wish you actually gave young me a chance to actually listen to some of the things that I would say. I remember my first ever television interview ever, right? My very first ever television interview. I was 13 and I think I was with somebody from ENCA called Zikona. Yes, I remember her. Yeah, she was yes, she was very kind to me. She was very kind to me because I was actually I did tell her I've never actually ever been on television and I've never even seen the camera that you shoot with. So I was a bit like, I think I was a tiny little tad bit nervous, and she was very kind to me. So she made me very comfortable. And I remember actually saying to her when she said, why did you actually do what you did? What is at the core of this, right? And I said, this is not about me. Neither is it about my peers. This is actually about us paving the way for a conversation that we are not having in the democratic South Africa. Racism was not buried in 94 in South Africa. Racism was not buried when Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as president. What was then constitutionalized and part of legislation has now been institutionalized. And our fight is for future generations of children that look like us to not go through this struggle of you enter these spaces and you are forced to assimilate to whiteness in order to be accepted or deemed fit for this space, right? And so speaking about race, I mean, I've given you just a bit of my background and I've spoken a bit extensively out there about my background, which is why race is so personal to me, which is why the struggle for anti-racism is one that is so deeply attached to me that I've stood by a cause which I've actually said many years ago, I'm prepared to stand by this cause for the rest of my life. And actually everything I do is going to pour back into this cause and defending this cause. So in that misunderstanding and making everything about hair, that's where you get it wrong. Because that's when you're going to feel like, well, I'm mixed race, I have no place talking about hair. Well, even in that, that's deeply a flawed statement because so many other people that look like me, that come from interracial families, not just only, we'll talk about the ones that were born in the democratic dispensation, have been cast out as well and have also experienced the very same thing that comes with the Black experience in going into environments and being told your hair is unruly, your hair, you need to fix your hair is unprofessional. So many people that look like me have experienced that, whether be it in school or in the workplace, right? And you can't take that away from them. You can't, right? And you can't also say that because of the complexity of their identity or the mixedness of their identity, they cannot talk about the experiences of racism that they experience primarily because of the Blackness that still exists in their identity and continues to shape some of their experiences and close them out of the conversation of race. That is a deeply flawed thing to do. And then when you look at people who look like me and that lived under the apartheid regime, there's a deeply painful history of people I've engaged who have been separated from families, who have been separated from their families, and a certain pain that came with a lot of the treatment that they got as well. So it's so deeply flawed to do that, you know. But
I want to bring it back to
we're now here in our conversation, you know, because you felt like I had no place, no right talking about what I
I was wrong. I'm sorry about that.
I've just clarified it, you know?
No, there's something I didn't understand, right, at first, right? Because my encounters with especially mixed race children is that most of them are Black-white mix, right? So you come from an Indian-Black mix. So you have no white privilege, unlike most mixed race kids who've got the one white parent, right?
But even in that...
So the intersectionality...
Even in that, there's even in that, you cannot ignore what the existence of Blackness in their identity, how that continues to shape some of their experiences and some traumatic experiences. Yes, there's a presence of whiteness, right?
Where?
There's a presence of whiteness, not in me, just in that example you're giving of mixed race children that are Black and white. There is a presence of whiteness, but you cannot ignore the fact that in them having that presence of whiteness, that doesn't give them a close proximity to whiteness or some form of being considered white, because there's a presence of Blackness in their identity that continues to shape some experiences that they have and some traumatic, and you can't ignore those experiences.
You know, we cannot ignore them, right? But also, they're not the same. So this is what I mean by that. So whereas if your dad, let's say, for example, was white, he would have the white privilege of being able to choose a black woman if he wanted. You know what I mean? He'd be an eccentric white person. Whereas if your dad is non-white, right, and is choosing a black person, he is choosing to go lower down on the social hierarchy when it comes to racial classifications. You know, especially in South Africa, Indians are a little bit higher on the social hierarchy or by the apartheid construct, right? So he'd be choosing to go further down, which would then mean that he'd be abused by those like him, right? Just in the same way, like a white person who chooses a black partner would be abused by those like him. But as a white person, you're not oppressed just because you're looked at differently by other whites. Whereas, and an Indian person, you are actually effectively oppressed. You don't have privilege. And another thing is that a white person, that let's just say you were to date a white guy in your life. Unfortunately, because of how society is, he would be able to elevate you to a position where other black women would see you as more privileged than them because you were able to attract a white person. You know what I mean?
I think that's a bit of a flawed statement, actually.
Well, I
And
think,
and I think that's also the beauty of conversation. We
Yeah.
are allowed to disagree, right?
Okay.
I have to disagree with you on some of those statements.
Okay.
Because I think that, and maybe I think you're speaking from a point of having not actually lived that experience, right? Yes, it's true. It's a fact. A white person being with a black person does not take away the existence of white privilege, because white privilege is systemic, right? It doesn't take that away. It's never going to take away your white privilege. You may be ostracized by the white community, but equally, whenever in interracial relationships, the person who is not black chooses to be with a black person, they go through a lot of being ostracized by their own community, right? And I wouldn't perhaps term that as oppression, but they go through a lot of being ostracized, whether they're white, whether they're Indian, whether they're colored, whether they're Asian.
Yeah.
They are still ostracized.
No, that I relate to. That I
But
also
there are some
understand.
statements there
Yeah.
that
No,
are
but
flawed.
I'm just saying the white person, right?
There are some statements there that are flawed, though.
No. I hear you. So maybe let me explain it so that you understand my perspective. The white person will always be accepted by the other groups. So a white person marries an Indian woman. The Indian people, right, in general, or majority of them, will accept this white person, right? They'll be embracing of this white person. A white person marries a black woman. The black community will be accepting of this white person that's coming in. Now, the thing is this, is that when it's an Indian person, right, marrying a black person, the black people will not be as accepting as they would be of a white person.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see where you're trying to go with
Yeah.
it, but in the midst of getting to the point, there were
Yeah.
some statements that were flawed that I don't agree with. I see where you're going with it. So, yes, and you're bringing it back to my experience, right?
Well, I
In
want to talk about
South Africa,
how
we-
you saw your dad experiencing it.
In South Africa, because of the history of apartheid, there's a lot of anti-blackness in predominantly Indian communities, right? Your Chatsworth, Phoenix, Lodium, Lenasia, you
Yeah.
name them.
I've been
There's
there,
a
I know
lot
them,
of
yeah.
anti-blackness
Yeah.
that's there, right? Because of how the apartheid regime sought to classify people so insidiously as well, and sought to also indoctrinate people in certain classifications as well against other people as well, right? Which was very insidious of the apartheid regime. And it's insidious because this very same nature of classification and denial of certain privileges and granting of certain privileges has created a anti-blackness that exists in the community, as well as has drawn a divide, right? And so I see where you're going with it, right? And it's not to say when an Indian person is with a black person, people are different, families are different, right? There's also that. But you can't ignore the anti-blackness that exists in Indian communities, which is primarily why sometimes Indian people who choose to have relationships, marriages with Black people will be ostracized from their communities because of what the apartheid regime has done, which is why it's so important that in any anti-racism intervention, we also focus on beyond anti-racism, we focus on the eradication of anti-blackness, right? Particularly in communities such as predominantly Indian communities, right? And I'm saying this on the basis of, because I know a lot of people tend to sometimes say, but what qualified you to make that view? What qualified me to make this view is my identity and seeing the actual experience that I've actually had as somebody who comes from a relationship of a Black person and an Indian person, and actually seeing not being accepted in the Indian community, right? And also within Black communities, there's a lot of misconceptions, stereotypes that exist around Indian people that make the acceptance on that side so difficult as well.
Oh, that's a euphemism, but okay, cool. You're being kind to Black people.
That makes that acceptance.
There's a lot of
so
anti-Indian sentiment. It's like you really like you know what I mean. It's like
so
and then Black people would much rather, like a Black person, through apartheid oppression and everything else, would much rather get into a romantic relationship in general. Just I'm not talking in general. Okay, I might be misspeaking, but what I've observed in general.
I'm bringing you back to
Yeah.
the fact of understanding why that exists.
Okay, yes,
right?
please.
Because it's the system that we've come out of that still has its claws still in South African society, right? And there's a lot of, on the other end of the stick, right? When you go into Black communities, there's a lot of misconceptions around Indian people that are fueled by the nature of how Black people have also been treated or have also experienced Indian people through the anti-Blackness that they've experienced from Indian people, or the mistreatment that they've also experienced from Indian people. So the non-acceptance is also fueled by that, right? While with my particular experience, the misunderstanding came from misconceptions. That's what it was fueled by. You're encountering somebody that you've never really been taught to see in a certain light. You're encountering a religion that you've never had exposure to. And that's what fueled it as well. But to look at it generally, sometimes the misunderstandings and non-acceptance maybe from Black people around Indian people is sometimes predominantly fueled by the treatment that comes from Indian people towards Black people, which is driven by anti-Blackness. So there's a lot of factors to it, which is why South Africa tends to differ from the rest of the world around the conversation of race and racism because of the nature of our history and the nature of the system we come out of.
Or the particularities of our actual context.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
what I wanted to get to is that for me, what I felt maybe you weren't saying,
Are we
expressing.
talking about how you maybe felt about my activism and
Yeah.
what you think I didn't do and what you feel like I should have done and what you feel
No.
like
I've
I
completely
didn't
done a 180.
do? I didn't do enough based off of you. Is that what we're talking about?
No.
Just to clarify.
No. Okay. Number one, we're talking about me actually figuring out that maybe I had gotten you all wrong. But I've explained to you why I'm so mistrusting, you know. Let me bring it back to the hair thing, right? So there's a point in time.
Wait, can we pause the whole conversation?
Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
We're going to miss the whole purpose of the conversation, and that's my phobia right now.
No, don't worry.
Because now we've been speaking for some time and we haven't gotten to the actual stuff you wanted us to talk about.
No, we're almost there. This is it.
The Father's Day
Yeah,
stuff,
this
the
is
book.
the conclusion. That's the conclusion. No, I want you to conclude on that point.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Sorry. So, as I was saying, me misunderstanding and then coming to an understanding over the time that you've come about, right? Is because, you know, at the time that you came about, 2015, was Fees Must Fall year. right? I know that I made an album and I produced it, and like we made the album cover about the fees must fall, roads must fall protest to as a time capsule because we were working on it in 2015. So there's a lot going on in that 2015, and everybody was cropping up out of the woodwork with some sort of fight, some sort of activism. You know, it was very difficult to trust those
It was an
people
interesting period for youth activism in South Africa, basically.
at that point in time.
Yes, there was a lot of emergence of youth activism in South Africa, that period. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, 10 years later, right? 2015. Now, I could safely say you're the last man standing out of that entire crop. Whether it be the fees must fall, the roads must fall list, and everything else.
Very
No,
I would like to maintain that that's your view
That's my
and not
view.
my view, because
yeah, I'm just saying from my view. From my view, you're the
Yeah.
only person.
that's your view.
Out of any of that generation, there's no one that I want to have a conversation with, or whether I care if they want to have a conversation with me or not. I don't care about any of them because I've
That's
seen.
you.
Yeah, that's me. This is
Okay.
my personal view, right? What's drawn me to supporting you, right? After first being super skeptical, was my coming to understand certain particularities about you as a person, as an individual, and also the fact that you've been able to maintain this trajectory despite everything else. And the moment that really broke it for me,
Yeah.
right, was when Zozibini Toons won Miss South Africa. I knew immediately that the only reason people wanted her to win is because of you and your activism. They wanted someone who's got normal black hair, who doesn't have to wear a weave, who doesn't have to relax their hair, right? They wanted someone to be celebrated or to be given like a Miss South
Wouldn't say
Africa sash or
that,
something.
but
Well,
okay.
okay, that's what I wanted. Like
Okay.
personally, right?
That's what you wanted.
Yeah, me
Yeah, you.
personally, right? And then I think even beyond that, there was one with the Chiskop Shudu, right? So it became a thing. And that activism started with you, right? The activism, like about, okay, hold on. This is one thing about our identity. And I guess it intersects with everything else that we struggle with from a race perspective.
Yeah.
And yet, no one is actually looking into it. And also, it's probably one of the most lucrative parts of the beauty industry, like black women's hair. You know what I mean? Is probably one of the most lucrative aspects of the beauty industry globally. You created that moment. I had to change what I'd previously thought about that moment that you had, right? And then look for you in that current moment, right? And you were still present. I remember that when I was actually overseas, I was in New York when Zozibini won Miss Universe. I remember because I was watching it on Fox, on actual TV. And it was like a really big moment because I thought to myself, oh, she's won it, which means she's about to get an apartment here at the Trump Tower. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I was right there in the city and I could see this. And also, when I walked out, I was working, doing some work around Wall Street at the time. So there was a deli around the corner where I used to go. And when I walked out the very next day, because they'd known me as the South African guy, there's the South African guy that lives at the hotel around the corner. They're like, hey, South Africa, you guys won Miss Universe.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. So everything came together. Number one, a black woman won, right? She had the normal hair. She'd won Miss South Africa. Everyone celebrated the fact that she had normal hair. You know what I mean? It was a proud moment. And then she ends up winning Miss Universe, right? And even in the United States of America, black women are like, yes, she's got normal hair. You know what I mean? So you broke down so
Let's
many...
not use the term normal. It's a bit problematic in its nature, you know?
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah.
Because when you say normal,
She doesn't have to relax her hair. She's... You
is
know
there abnormal hair? So maybe let's
Yeah.
shift it to she has kinky hair.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, she has kinky hair
Mm-hmm.
that most black people can relate to. She's not maybe mixed race. She's not wearing a wig. She has kinky hair. Because I think terms like normal are just problematic in nature. Because then it makes you ask, oh, so is there abnormal hair?
You see? So...
So, yeah, let's say kinky hair that
So kinky hair.
across Africa, everybody can relate. You know, this is not somebody wearing a wig. This is also not somebody that's mixed race. And kinky hair that everybody can relate to. Yeah.
So all of a sudden, this all happens and it becomes a moment. It was a global moment. So I don't know where you, I don't know if you were in South Africa when Zozi won or whatever, but as much as I could relate that it was a moment back home from the people that I was calling back home because I could see and they felt it, you know what I mean? And when I did come back home and saw her reception, but when I saw it amongst African Americans and what it represented, I was like, wow, this is like, I know where it all started from. Like, I know where this actual thing, this revolution, this hair evolution, started from. So for me, I needed to reflect because, all of a sudden you became a mirror. All of a sudden my privilege was cast in my face. And I was thinking to myself, well, I mean, I used to wear dreadlocks at school, so I didn't think I needed to fight. But I was at a privileged private school, so I could have whatever hair that I wanted to have. You understand? But the mere fact that at 25 years old, right, a 13-year-old young girl, right, is changing the world through activism, which 12 years earlier should have been what my age group was doing, my contemporaries doing, and our failure. And showing that we've probably lost 2 generations in that space that don't actually have that activism within them. And then once we now make this ZULAIKHA's moment, right, apart from the fact that...
It doesn't belong to me, that moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to me.
And the media loves doing that, though.
And the reason why it doesn't belong to me is because my story is not unique or somewhat different from any other Black, colored South African that has seen racism post 94, or even our parents' generation and their struggle with hair and identity. That moment doesn't belong to me. And it never belonged to me. And I understood that that doesn't belong to me because of how much it resonates with so many other people across the world beyond it being a moment that I was central to that moment. But it doesn't belong to me. And it belongs to all of us because we all resonate with that. That moment represents something for all of us. That's why it doesn't belong to me.
No, thank you. That's a very gracious way to accept the compliment. But you did change the world, especially for many Black girls. And, I gained, you earned a lot of respect from me through that moment. And from that moment, I thought maybe there isn't any more respect that I could have for you. You know what I mean? You became like who else can we say? It's you and Malala Yousafzai. You know what I mean? That's it. Except you didn't get shot at, you know what I mean? And you weren't in a war-torn Afghanistan where you didn't even have the right for an education. But your fight is just as valid, and is just as revolutionary. And for me, the moment where I was like, damn it, I actually, need to, I don't know, in my own way, celebrate you or wherever, was when you started speaking about the role that your dad played in your activism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you've spoken that he's no longer around with us physically,
Yeah.
right? But through hearing you speak and seeing how you're developing as a human being, I can see his presence and his teachings in you. And I can see that a lot of that spunk that you have, a lot of that tenacity that you have to still show up, even though you know that you're not money. You know what I mean? You're not going to go everywhere and people love you or accept you and praise and give you praise. You know what I mean? I mean, even just you, after years of criticizing you and, maybe being jealous a bit, but mostly criticizing. I'll just say, be kind to me. Just say I was criticizing, not jealous. To see that, he instilled a certain level of self-awareness in you that can allow for you to understand that maybe you don't have to prove yourself to people, but you do prove yourself to the world. And there's nothing wrong with that process or allowing people to come around. We're shooting this episode just a couple days before Father's Day, and usually Father's Day is synonymous with the Comrades Marathon because it was usually run around Father's Day. Comrades Marathon was just this past week, and this is a day after Father's Day that we're actually having this. And I wanted to have you on this platform because, when you spoke about your father on SMWX, it really touched me and moved me because that's also something that I'm passionate about. Just celebrating fatherhood, especially Black fathers, because I'm not a father, but I'm a Black man now, and I'm an adult Black man, and I never related to the criminalization of Black men's bodies until I was thrust into adulthood, where at turning 18, you realize that you can finally go to prison, and that place is made for Black men. You know what I mean? Now that I'm at the age where I can be a father or whatever, I just find that fatherhood, especially for Black men, is something that's seen as different, outside of the norm, something that is valorized but shouldn't be. You know what I mean? Like being a father should be normal. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, just by being a present dad or picking up your kids at school, you're now a good person in society, when that might not be the case. And I wanted to thank you for celebrating your father, and to also tell you that maybe when you were 13 years old, you couldn't have imagined that you would set off a sequence of events that would free up Black women all around the world, and you didn't watch a Chris Rock movie to gain this, because we do get inspired by what we see in the media. But for young children that are able to, stand up for themselves without having to be indoctrinated by the media, that is great, man. And I guess I have to really say that, wow, your father's done an amazing job, and he should be really proud of himself for the young woman that you are. There are many girls who are very close with their dads, my sister's being one of them. My sister's my dad's favorite. And I'm a guy, so it's fine. I accept it. I'll have a daughter one day, and I'll punish my sons like that as well.
No, you don't have to do that.
What do you want to say to the dads? Brave Like Me is your book, and I think that it should be prescribed reading for every dad to their daughter.
Or son. Because it's not just Brave Like Me is not a book only for girls.
Tell us about it. You explain how Brave Like Me came about, and how your dad became the loud hailer to this inner voice that he nurtured since you were a young child.
Yeah, my dad. Wow. Actually, I love my dad so much. Talking about him, my face lights up. And people have actually noticed that my entire face changes whenever I talk about my dad. That's how much my dad means to me. My dad is everything to me. That's why I think grief, I've made peace with grief being a lifelong companion now, because my grief is a representation of the love that existed between my dad and I. And so that love can't be shrinked. That love still exists. And for as long as that love is there, grief will always be a companion of mine. I've the life I live now, I never thought, nobody actually ever thought one day ZULAIKHA would actually have to learn to live without her dad in the physical realm. Everybody that grew up with me was so used to it's ZULAIKHA and her dad. you know. I remember when my dad passed, got so many messages from people that went to primary school with me, or even people maybe in a local supermarket would actually say to me, "Oh, you're that girl that's always here with their dad. Where's your dad now?" You know, I mean, even strangers knew me consistently with my dad, right? I remember saying to someone, I went to Menlyn at some point, maybe after my dad passed, and somebody actually said to me, "Oh, where's your dad? You're always here with your dad." I was like, "No, he passed." And they were like so gutted. And they were like, "Man, you're the one person where you could tell your dad really, really, really loves you, and you really love your dad as well." And I was like, yeah. I never thought I'd have to actually ever learn to survive the world without my dad there with me, because it was the life I live now is so abnormal to the life I was accustomed to, you know. Yeah, it's something that I think I've made peace with. I'm going to live with a certain ache in my heart that's never gonna go away, you know. And grief is a lifelong companion of mine, actually, you know.
That's a nice quotable. Who taught you that?
I've learned that through coming to terms with what I've been going through, with trying to accept and understand life without my dad, and just the journey that it's been, the journey that I'm still in, you know, that grief now is like that friend you can't get rid of, you know? You've got that one friend you can't get rid of. They always come, you can fight, they always come back to you, you know, you always fix things all the time, even though they might...
yeah, I've got that one invasive thought that keeps coming.
The one friend that maybe every time they're like, "Yeah, I'm friends with Nerta," and they roll their eyes, you know? So it's like that friend.
I wonder, you met that friend earlier today. Of mine.
It's like that friend. Grief is always going to be there as my companion in life, right? Because I can't forget about my dad. Neither, because he's not here, neither does that love that I have for him disappear. In fact, I feel it more intensely than I've felt it before. Like, my God, I love my dad.
Do you look like him?
You know? Yes.
Oof,
That's
I do. Terrible.
Where's my phone? I do, you know?
Ah, terrible. My sister also looks like my dad.
Our teeth are the same. That's how much I look like him.
I always say to my sister, the prettiest girls look like their dads. No, like genuinely, I do say that to my sister, because I always thought my sister was like the prettiest girl in the world.
So this is a picture of him smiling. Look at his teeth. Our teeth look alike. Look at my teeth.
Why is he looking down? What was going on?
It's just a picture of him smiling. And
nice. Then, but he's got long eyelashes. Because that's what I've noticed. Your eyelashes. Wow.
This is a picture of us.
Oh, yes. Now I see it. Okay, I can't see your ears, but it looks... No, I'm looking at your ears in the picture. I can't see the other ear.
Yeah.
But it looks like, yeah, you got almost similar ears.
Yeah. But if you look at him here now and I look...
Yeah, I know.
It's weird. It's like the older I get, the more I'm looking like my dad, right? So we look alike as well, you know. I see him in the mirror now when I look at myself as well.
What does he say?
So my dad contributed a lot to me and the person that I am. I think one of the first things that stands out about my dad is I think my dad was born to be a girl dad. I think he really...
Just had a fight with someone about that term. Okay, but continue.
And the reason why I say this is because my dad came from being this man that was so like masculine, didn't feel his feelings, you know, and then now you have a girl child, and that somewhat softens you because you have to learn to relate to that girl child. You now have emotions you need to dig deep into so that you can relate with that girl child. It sort of softens you in a way as well, you know.
It's because
I think
you usually view women as someone to conquer, and now you've got someone to comfort.
Now, for example, one of the examples are my dad was somebody that was a commander on an exile camp, right? My dad participated in the anti-apartheid struggle.
Wow.
And
Damn, your dad came to
then
do a lot in South Africa. Yo.
he now, years later, pivots into a man that drinks tea at a small pink table because he has a daughter. And now you've gone from this man that was a commander in exile, and now in the evening they're painting your nails with nail polish so that I can learn how to use nail polish. That was the dad that I had. Like, my dad was forced to wear pink tutus because
Wow.
that was what I wanted. And he was like, oh, okay, that's what you want. Okay, we can pretend this is a tea party. Okay. And I remember at some point, I was curious about nail polish, and then I learned how to paint his nails so that I could learn how to paint nails generally.
Wow.
Yeah, that
I learned how to paint nails with my mother. I wore her brassiere. I used to take onions because it looked like they've got like a nipple type.
no time.
I'm just saying. So you just feel normal. No, this is when I was a child. I was a child, not in my adulthood. Life.
So yes, yeah, my dad was someone I spent a lot of time with growing up. And one of the things that stands out for me in how my dad raised me was my dad was an interesting disciplinarian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where my dad sort of raised me for the world in a way of actually the world, understanding that the world is not rosy and how to go on with life when you realize that the world is not rosy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's coming to like save you, cuddle you. My dad raised me to sort of understand that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The principles he taught me made me understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest things that made how he raised me so different, and it stands out, is that a lot of the times girls are taught, as little girls, they're taught to strive to be likable, right? That's a big part of like what little girls sometimes get indoctrinated with.
Mm-hmm.
Strive to be likable.
Mm-hmm.
My dad didn't teach me or raise me to be likable.
Sorry, it's time for you to hit the stove.
My dad didn't raise me to be likable.
Yeah.
From the time I was a child, my dad actually taught me, in life, you might not be everybody's cup of tea. And that is okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is okay. And that should never take away anything from you. There are some that will like you, and then there are some that might not like you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not up to you to dig up the reasons why they don't like you. You go on with life. Because in life, sometimes we are liked, sometimes we are not liked, right? And then he brought back that lesson when I was 13, right? That lesson when I was a child was just about likability, right? Because he was navigating raising a child that often got bullied at school, that often had no one to sit with during break time.
Were you liked by the teachers though?
Right? No.
Ooh.
So then that's what that lesson was for when I was a child, that it doesn't take away anything from you if people don't like you, Then he brought back that lesson when I was 13 and I got thrusted into the media and my, call it a career of activism or trajectory of activism started. And he actually said to me, now, I'm going back to likability. I've always taught you that I'm not raising you to be liked by everyone because you're some people's cup of tea and you're not other people's cup of tea. He brought back that lesson to actually teach me that now, where your life is going, you're not going to be liked by many people because of the views you carry, because of what you stand for, because of what you believe in, because of success you may obtain, right? You're not going to be liked by everyone, but it's not your job to be liked. That's not your job. It's not your job to be liked in what you do now. And he said to me, in you now becoming an activist, many will dislike you. You're going to get many bullets thrown at you. But that doesn't mean you stop doing what you believe in. You stop standing for what you believe in. That changes something about you, because there will be some that don't like you. There will be some that actually despise you. And you know what? At the end of the day, you continue. That's the job you have. In the middle of adversity, you continue because adversity doesn't command you to stop doing what you're doing. It's right now not your job to be liked because you're doing something that not everyone is going to like and it may offend some. And that is entirely okay. And that lesson has carried me in life. You know, I've received so many bullets. You know, even after this conversation, some of you may like me, some of you may not like me. But the most important thing my dad taught me was that is okay.
Don't worry, they don't like me. They like everyone I speak to.
It's okay to not be liked sometimes, you know? And it's a lesson that continues to carry me in a lot of conversations, you know? Whether be it speeches I've given, whether be it things I've said, views I've had, certain things I've chosen to stand by, admiration I've received. There were some that didn't like me, and that was entirely okay. And you don't always need to respond to that. You actually don't need to respond to that. You know, I've gotten a lot of jabs, actually. A lot. Even the very conversation that you're referencing, the SMWX conversation, many didn't like me and didn't like the views that I had.
On
Right?
that episode?
Yeah, and that's okay.
Wow.
And that's okay because my dad taught me, you're not here to be liked.
Yeah, you won my heart with that episode, just so you know.
You're not here to be liked. And even when they like you, that shouldn't be the center of your world, that they like you. That shouldn't. As long as you like yourself, that's enough. Right? And I've always been able to continue in the midst of adversity, you know? That's why I say some of the things you said to me on social media are so mild.
Thank you.
They're mild.
Thank you.
They're
Thank you, Lord.
mild.
You weren't that offended and we're able to have this
No,
conversation
I'm not saying
today.
I wasn't offended. I was offended here and there.
But not to the extent where
You
we
know?
can't have this conversation today?
Yeah, you know, people
Or did you
deserve
forgive?
to be given chances, you know.
Thank you.
Some of the things you said to me were very mild
Yeah.
and extremely mild compared to what I've gotten out there. It hasn't been easy sailing to continue in this trajectory that started 9-10 years ago. It hasn't been easy sailing, you know. I've been tossed around, gotten bullets, jabs, death threats, you know. And at the center of all of that, the reason why I'm still here and I still stand by what my cause was. I still, you know, I'm not the same ZULAIKHA the world got to meet years ago. I've written books that pour back into that very same cause that I've stood
You've
by.
written bestsellers.
Yes.
Sorry,
I've
not just
done
books.
many other things and I continue to exist boldly because my dad taught me your job here is not to be liked. And it's okay if they don't like you. It's okay. And it's also okay if they like you. And if they like you, let that not be the center of your world, that they like you. Because the day they don't like you, you're going to feel crushed. You know? That's one of the greatest lessons that continues to keep me around, you know? Because I know that at the end of the day, in whatever views I have, what I stand for, I'm speaking my truth and I'm standing for a cause. And in me doing the work that I do, it's not to be liked. I learned that very early in life. And that's the type of father that I got, you know. I'd choose my dad to be my dad over and over and over again in every single realm and every single lifetime because of what he instilled in me. And yes, the time we spent together was very short. I only had him for 16 years.
Wow.
You know, I always think about what if I had him for like
Your metric
30
dance?
something years, you know, what if I had him for up until I turned 50, you know? But what he instilled in me,
What if you could introduce grandchildren to him? All
You know?
those types of things.
what he instilled in me in that 16 years I got to have him are things that live with me forever. Some of them didn't make sense, maybe because I was quite young then, but they make sense now. And those are the things that keep me standing strong, you know? Just because he's not here, that doesn't mean his lessons don't live, his principles don't live. He's very alive in my life because his principles continue to live, you know? His principles continue to keep me going. Yeah, so that's
So
the dad I got.
We've
And
got a problem in South Africa, though. with absent dads. So your dad is no longer here physically present, right? But there are many dads who are physically around,
Yeah.
but maybe have got hindrances. Let's not prosecute them now, right? But let's have a message to the dads that are watching, that need to know the importance of the role they can still play, even if it's from a distance.
Yeah, because
for
I
the
said to you,
daughters
the
and their
most
children.
important thing that I believe any child should have, right? The things that my dad taught me, I look at life now and I say, I don't think there was anyone else that was going to teach me that, I don't think there was anyone else that would have given me the character that I have today to actually live boldly, and actually somebody that could have prepared me for the life I'm living. I don't think there was anyone that could have prepared me for what it's like to grow up in the media with the simple lesson as, if they don't like you, it's okay. And if they like you, it's also okay. But let that not be the center of your world. I don't think there was anyone else, right? And that's why I always say that there's a very important role that dads play in a child's life, That's somebody that prepares you actually for the reality of the world you are going to live in and how to be okay in that reality. And that's somebody that gives you discipline in life as well, because your dad is your disciplinarian, your mother is your nurturer, right? Like you always say, you just said earlier in our conversation, if you're looking to be coddled, you go to your mother, right? If you're looking for the truth, you're going to your dad, right? Every child
I'm going to my mother
deserves.
because I didn't do my own laundry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my mother does my laundry for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do it. I drop
That's
it off when
nice.
my dad's not around,
That's nice.
so that he doesn't say, "Why isn't he
because
paying?"
your dad was gonna say, because your dad is gonna say to you grown and old. Why are you not doing your own laundry?
Or why am I not paying for it?
Or your dad is gonna say to you, you're a grown man. Why are
Yeah.
you not doing your laundry? Dad's
Yeah.
gonna hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And every child deserves that, right? Because I think we live in a world with so many adults that have broken inner children, that don't have healed inner children. And you think the role that your inner child plays in your life is insignificant. No. You see people as adults, right? But the experiences that attribute how they are, who they choose to be, are somewhat governed by who they once were as a child and the inner child that lives in them and dictates their response to things, how they regulate feelings or navigate certain things, right? And I think if children in South Africa could have both parents present, regardless of whether or not there's a relationship that exists between their parents, deserve to have both parents present in their lives, right? That is something really beautiful that I don't think we should ever take as an insignificant thing, Having your father present in your life is a very beautiful
And
thing.
on your birth certificate, because that also warps the stats,
Okay, yes, and having your father on your birth
Yeah,
certificate.
because we read the stats, like 70% of kids don't have their fathers on their birth certificates, and people think that
I
means that
didn't know that.
70% of kids don't have fathers, which is
Yeah,
not
so
the same
having your
thing.
father present, does a lot for you in life and the person you become. And my message to fathers is actually in Brave Like Me. Brave Like Me is not just the book about me and
Actually,
a book
speak about that. Let's speak about Brave Like Me, because
a
I want
book
all
about-
fathers to have a copy. I want all fathers to read it for their sons, for their daughters. If some of you don't know how Brave Like Me looks, it's right over her shoulder. If you look at the angle of the camera that's focused on ZULAIKHA, and it's in focus right now as we speak. That's how it looks as it goes back to focusing on her face. She'll explain what the book is about and who it's for.
Brave Like Me is for all children because it teaches children to live bravely and exist bravely. And it teaches children that bravery is an act that has no size, no age. Anyone can be brave. And that's why I used my story, because many people think about the brave girl who was at the forefront of a movement bigger than her, where later, many years down the line, that one act of bravery no longer belonged to her anymore because so many other people resonated with that, right? But nobody knows who was the girl before the world got to know of her. What were the experiences that contributed to her becoming an activist, right? There were very molding experiences that I had as a child that made me the person I am today. So it's a story of getting to know who was ZULAIKHA as a child before the world got to know about her, so that children can take away from that being brave and existing bravely, because the world is not changed by people that are popular or people with a certain status or net worth in life. The world is changed by the everyday, ordinary person who chooses to stand by something and believe in it and chooses to exist bravely. The world is changed by people who choose to be brave enough to believe in the delusion of I can change the world. That's who the world is changed by. It's delusional to think that you can change the world. And it's changed by the everyday delusional person who chooses to be brave enough to stand by that, right? And the reason why I've added my dad in Brave Like Me, beyond him having played a significant role, I was really, and I'm still struggling with grief, right? And I thought, well, let me write a book where he'll live in the book forever. And
So he's in the book, or
yes, he is in the book as a main character.
How does he manifest?
So he plays a role where the young ZULAIKHA struggles with bullying and not believing in herself. And he's the person that motivates her and teaches her to find her own unique abilities that set her apart from the rest of the world, and share those with the world and be brave and believe in herself. He's the character that's there when she experiences bullying in school, right? And so the reason why I also chose to write about him is actually to celebrate present fatherhood. It's not something we celebrate or talk enough about. Yes, the book is a celebration of present fatherhood and the beauty of present fatherhood. It's a beautiful thing to have your dad in your life, right? Your dad is going to teach you things that nobody else is going to teach you. Your dad is going to prepare you for the world in a way nobody else is going to prepare you for the world, right? It's a celebration of present fatherhood. It's an ode to present fatherhood. And in the same breath, it's also a word of empowerment for dads, particularly that are of a younger generation, or maybe even of an older generation, to be present in their children's lives. Because you never know what that could do for them and what that means to them. It means so much more to them than it will ever mean to you, just for you to be there in their lives. It's one thing to be present for someone financially, but it's another thing to be the person that they one day say instilled the principles that made them the adult that they are, that makes them the person who they are. It's also a note of empowerment, right? That's why I always say Brave Like Me has so many themes in the book beyond it just being about the story of ZULAIKHA Patel, the activist. There's so many themes in it. It's a note of empowerment for dads to continue to be present in their children's lives, right? And the role that you will play in the shaping of somebody who's going to be part of the world, who might be a world changer, who might contribute in a positive way to the world.
It might be the next ZULAIKHA Patel.
Shaped that person. Right? And that's not something you would want to miss out on. It's a note of empowerment as well. It's a note of empowerment even for those that are not dads yet and have a desire to be dads, you know,
like me.
on the type of dad you could be for your child, right? And for example, the child I have someday in the future will never meet my dad, but I have so much to tell them about my dad. And that's because my dad chose to be there. And you can also do the same, right? And being there for someone doesn't even mean that you need to be there financially, because there's also a whole conversation around the economy and black men and finances, you know? But emotionally being there for someone...
You're talking about finances and I just thought, oh my goodness.
They're never going to forget that.
Yeah.
Ever, right? They'll never forget that. Neither will they ever forget you, right? And outside of it being a note of empowerment, I do hope that through how my illustrator has so beautifully captured my dad, just without reading the book, you can already get a sense of my dad's character, his kindness, the type of person he was just by looking at the illustrations, seeing his smile, his consistent smile from the beginning of the story till the end of the story, seeing his softness and delicateness through the role that he played when you look at the book, right? When you look at the book, I do hope that that also contributes to us seeing men, black men, men of color in a different light as well, right? And in a light of also understanding that men also have emotions just as we do and have love to give as well, right? And something I said in the SMWX interview, which I will repeat again,
Thank you.
is that we live in a society where, men have so many struggles, right? And we also don't talk enough about men's mental health. June, outside of there being Father's Day in June, it's
In the cold.
men's mental
In the
health
cold.
month. It's men's mental health month. And we are not talking enough about the mental health struggles that men have, right? How it's not easy to smile as my dad smiles through my book as a man, right? We're not talking enough about that. We don't see men as people who deserve kindness as well sometimes. The way the world has brutally become, and we're losing so many men to suicide as well because of those unspoken struggles. And I hope that in people reading
We've
my
lost
book,
450,000 men to suicide this year, 2025 alone.
exactly,
It's
and
not
I'm
even
saying
July.
we don't even talk about men's. How many people know that June is, outside of it being Father's Day, it's men's mental health
I mean,
month.
that's where I found out about that stat. Is
Right.
that it's June now, it's Men's Mental Health Month, And
And-
now that the hype of pride has dialed it down, we are actually seeing, oh, damn it. This has been something that people have, I guess, advocated for. The fact that we need to look at men's mental health and how they're presenting in the world. But it's only now that women like yourself, young girls like yourselves, are starting to speak up for men as well. That, we're no longer just obsessing about the girl child, but we're looking at the boy child.
The boy child is going to live with the girl child, and he needs to know how to not just coexist with her only. He's also got needs that we need to care for as well and prioritize as well, right? When we do reach a state in society where we've reached the mark of being able to offer equal access, equal pay, we need to also focus on the fact that outside of us talking about opportunity for the girl child, the boy child now in 2025, the boy child, the male graduate that leaves university now,
I'm a dropout,
right?
sorry, I can't relate,
The male
yeah.
graduate, the male matriculant deserves access to opportunity as well, right? And that would also answer a lot of social ills that exist primarily because of poverty. Because when you shut out these men, what becomes of them,
They become monsters.
right? And so
There's a place
I
where they
hope
keep
that-
us. It's
that-
called Sun City. I call it Monsters Inc. There's lots of us there. I was there for like a couple weeks, but I met other brothers of mine. Like there's a place. It's like everyone who's there has been shut out from society in some way, and also all of them love their mothers, so they love women. But
So
yeah,
Brave Like Me, I hope, contributes to the understanding of, through people seeing my dad and how affectionate my dad was and seeing how he's represented in my book, that maybe turns to you also seeing that men are not just people that are emotionless and live a life experience without emotion. Men are people that also deserve grace and a world that is slightly kinder to them, right? I grapple a lot now with wishing my dad could have lived in a world that was kinder to him, a world that cared for him beyond him being a provider, a world that cared for how is your heart, right? Before you can offer me something, some form of provision, how is your heart? I truly wish my dad could have lived in a world that cared for his heart, right? And so it's through my book that I also hope that in seeing who my dad was and how he's represented in my book, we're able to also offer grace to men in society, grace to men struggling with anxiety, depression, grace to men struggling to also live in a world that continues to also throw obstacles at them, particularly Black men, men of color, economic obstacles that make it so hard for you to be this provider that now your entire life has become about that. And that's why you have these mental health struggles, because you're fighting to not just survive, but you're fighting to survive and ensure that others survive through you. And that burden is tough, right? And offers men like that some grace, right? Offers men that are immigrants, immigrant dads, you know, that are taught to persevere because you're an immigrant. You're not in your home country. You have to persevere. Offers them
You
grace.
still have to be a dad. I'm sorry.
Offers them grace, right?
Yeah.
Offers the boy child some grace. Offers a young Black man that is struggling with unemployment or access to opportunity and is having doors shut in his face. Perhaps maybe because some opportunities are primarily just for women and it's tough for you to get by, offers men like that grace. So I do hope that my book also contributes to the changing of the narrative.
Yeah.
And yeah, if I had a message to dads out there, oh man, Father's Day, what a trigger. Wow. 'Cause
I'm so sorry.
I don't have my
You know
dad
what I mean?
here, but you know, if I had a message to dads out there, is that you never really know how loved you are by your child. So always be there, because one day when you're not there, they're always going to remember that you were there, right? And whether or not you have the money, just be there, because you never know how significant that is to them. You know, you were there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my message.
No, thank you very much for that message. And thank you for having this conversation with me. Thank you for giving me a second chance or a third or fourth chance. I don't know how many chances you needed to give me to come here, but you gave me a couple of chances and I'm grateful for that. Thank you for also, you know, giving me a chance to change my opinion. So before what happened with you, right? Like I'd given up on women, especially young girls, like in the modern times. I'd seen how my father played a very active role in my sister's life, you know, and showing up for her and presenting himself differently because of her. And I wanted to do the same thing as well for any woman in my life, whether it be my mother, you know, my sister herself, you know, a romantic partner and everything else. And with that, I maybe gave myself too much rope, and I found myself trying to prove myself worthy of love, right? To people who weren't taught how to love, you know, in the same way that maybe I learned from home. So it came at a point in time where I'd given up on the fact that women, especially in our society, which is very mimetic, you know what I mean? Like, people read the same magazines, they watch the same TV shows. And we spoke about this earlier in an interview, whether you watched shows like Sex in the City and all those types of things. So I understand now why you're different. But to a lot of the girls who've been socialized through a lot of, you know, E-TV, or I mean E or whatever, Kardashians or all those types of things that you see in media, it's very difficult for them to understand that, you know, they don't need to become this narcissist that doesn't believe that men exist or have any humanity or are there just for their provision. And just you speaking about it, just the small gesture, that small gesture of saying, "Hey, I see you," changed a lot in me as well. Right now, we're shooting this episode. I'm like a year divorced. You know what I mean? I never thought that would be something that I identify with, like as a human being, especially in my youth. I'm only 35 years old now. I feel just through my own experience that there's so many microaggressions being committed against men that make this adversarial relationship that we're having between young men and young women that we're seeing play out on social media, throughout the gender-based violence stats or interpersonal relationship dynamics that are not seeming to normalize or, have the violence taken out of them. I think that, girls like you and girls who have empathy for young men, for old men, for their fathers and everything else are too few and far between. And I feel like you speaking about issues like this, speaking about your father, is going to give a voice to many of the other girls. I feel like maybe this is also part of your second birth at Activism. You've tackled a very important thing and something that a lot of people can relate to and resonate with. But right now, I feel like you're going into tackling something that is overlooked, but at the same time is the result of all the other oppression that we faced. The fact that the black
It's
man.
because of colonialism.
Yeah.
We don't have a proper family structure in African society because of colonialism. Yeah.
Yeah, so certain things like that. And if you look at whatever it is, whether it be apartheid, racism, colonialism, it's put the black man at the bottom of the food chain, and no one has actually looked and said, how do we get the black man off of the bottom? How do we stop him from feeling like, he's literally lives his life in purgatory forever? So I think that's important work that you're doing, maybe not actively, but it's part of the work that you're doing, and I'd like to encourage you to continue on that path, and to ask also as well as we close this for you to tell us where else we can support you. I know that you're working on many projects. You're the CEO of ZULAIKHA PATEL Incorporated.
It's PTY Ltd.
Okay, I didn't mean that like exactly. Okay. Oh,
Okay, but
is that a company?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm saying it as like figuratively speaking, as in like you as a brand, as a business. So you've already registered yourself as a company.
A long time ago. It's ZULAIKHA Patel PTY Ltd for empowerment.
So please, I think no, I wasn't clapping I'm clapping because like that's a great thing. How do people support ZULAIKHA Patel Pty Ltd? You're looking into that camera. I'm going to escape for a bit to allow you to have that closing moment in camera where you can promote your brand. Your book is right behind you over the shoulder. They can already see it.
Yeah. Supporting me, a huge part of supporting me
Right
is supporting the books that I've written. I've got 2 fantastic best-selling children's books that I've written, My Coily Crowny Hair and Brave Like Me. And I really think that books that have representation, a message of empowerment are so important. So I'm grateful for the support I've received thus far, especially on Brave Like Me. And I'm hoping for continued support with it.